Боловсролын салбарт бодлогын өнцгөөс, технологийн өнцгөөс бол олон янзаар өмнө нь бол ажиллаж байсан. За тэгээд тухайн үед бол яагаад хүмүүс ер нь сурдаг юм бэ? Хүмүүсийг сурахад хүргэдэг зүйл нь юу юм бэ гэдэг ийм энгийн асуултыг бид өөрсдөө асуусан.
We actually
За
don't
тэгээд
like
ингээд
to
судлаад
learn,
үзэхэд бол бид нар ер нь сурах дургүй.
right? I mean, I don't like to learn. You know, every time I have to do it, it's a pain, right? Because learning anything is extremely hard, right? It's not something that comes natural to us because we just are so interested in things, but learning is really hard, and that's why it's so painful. So I started thinking about this. Let me see if I can. I think the clicker is not working. Thank you. So I started thinking about this from the perspective of the learner or the student, right? So if you're a student, then what are the different dimensions for you to learn? I call this dimensions of learning intentions. And there are sort of three segments of this. The one is learning for fun, learning for tests, and learning for life. Now, what is learning for fun? You have an Italian boyfriend and you really want to learn Italian because you want to impress your potentially future in-laws. You don't really have to do it. You're a nice person, right? You don't have to really learn the language, but you think it might be really good, to be able to speak to it. And then you start learning it, and it's one of those things which, again, you will ask yourself after a month, do I really have to learn Italian? I have to do so many other things. I work, I do this and that. But the learning for fun sector, and I'll show you this, is it's the most technology-enabled sector in the education space globally. This is why everyone is talking about edtech. It's not because of all the stuff in schools and all the government stuff that happens globally. This is the sector which gets everyone excited and where there are billions and billions of dollars of investment in something that if you look for, if you really look for how it works, right? If you want to learn a language, you can download an app. If you want to learn something, say, about artificial intelligence, because everyone is talking about it, you can buy a course on Coursera or Udemy or MITx or some other place, and they will give you a course that will go for 3 months. Chances are that you will drop out, right? So here, for example, you see the completion rates of a lot of the massive online courses that are there, and you'll see that the more students enroll, the lesser percentage of students will actually complete it. It gets a little better the fewer students enroll in the first place, but the numbers are somewhere below 10%. So imagine a school system where only 10% of the students graduate. That school system would be considered a failure for all practical purposes. That doesn't mean that learning for fun is a failure, right? Because what learning for fun has taught us is that you can get, famous professors to teach their course online, and you can then download the content and watch it at your own leisure. You can distribute content over the internet in a way that we've never thought possible. There are, coming back to the language learning things, there are things like Duolingo, right? Which is, if, my son who has to learn German now, he's learning German using Duolingo to start with, because it's fantastic, right? And it's free. I don't know how they make money, but it doesn't matter because venture capital is pushing money into it, because at some future point, maybe they will figure out a way to make money. But they're doing great stuff, right? And it's deep technology very intelligent people who run these businesses. And the only thing is, from an ed tech, from an education perspective, the impact, what my most significant learning on this is that, just giving access to something, whether it's the internet or a service, is not necessarily guaranteeing an educational outcome. It's a big mistake to think that only if you provide access to something, people will come and everything will be positive. Some things will be positive, but there are somehow no stakes involved in this, and thereby you will probably not learn Italian in the way how you want to, even though many services will tell you that I have an AI that understands you better than any other AI, and thereby you will learn something better. That's not true, because learning is just so damn hard. So the learning for fun segment is what we are hoping today technology-enabled education is going to be in the future, and I think it's highly inefficient. Now let's look at the learning for tests. What is learning for tests? Learning for tests is what you do in school. Now, educators will not necessarily see it this way, but because they say we are preparing people for life, but the reality is that you don't go through 12 years of school without a degree. You don't go through 4 years of studies without a degree, right? And on each step, some policymaker said that if you meet these requirements, then you are qualified to do a certain job, right? That's how school systems work. And the positive side on this, school systems have been incredibly successful. And and without even being technology enabled, by the way, right? I mean, the global literacy rates and numeracy rates over the last 150 years have gone down dramatically, so that today the global average, for example, of literacy is 80%. You can say that it has to do a lot with the way how our school systems work today. And our school systems are not tech-enabled. Now, what is missing? It's clearly missing that digital literacy, the ability for people to work in technology jobs, the ability to people to even deal with technology, is not something that schools teach very effectively. But here's an interesting point to this, right? It also, or maybe another way of saying it is that what is happening today is that the nature of work is changing way faster than educational systems can, right? So what you need to teach in the school system, where you have to build the educational infrastructure, right? You have to build the schools and the administrations and the curriculums for it. You have to build the service delivery. You have to train teachers to teach what you need to teach, right? You have to develop the right kind of high-stakes test that essentially test whether you've actually learned and qualify whatever needs to be qualified, and then you want to go into entrepreneurship or employment or whatever it is you want to do. But the kind of jobs that are waiting for you on top, they're changing incredibly rapidly. 10 years ago, the job market today is very different from only 5 to 10 years ago. And in 10 years from now, probably a significant double-digit percentage of people who are educated today, will not have jobs that they are prepared for, right? In 20 years from now, 50% of people will work on things that don't even exist today, right? So the policymaker-driven learning for tests is also very tricky. I'll give you another language learning thing. If you want to go to school in the United States or in the UK, you have to pass a TOEFL test or an equivalent to these English learning tests, right? So you can buy a service, or you can practice the test. You can pass the test that will qualify you as an English speaker with sufficient quality of speaking English to go to Cambridge University or Oxford University. I'm sorry. So, but you will land in the UK and you won't be able to order a sandwich because you won't be able to speak. The tests are not preparing you for the actual real world situation. regions, right? So there is a certain failure here in the system. There's a certain inefficiency in the system, where I think learning from for fun market is actually an interesting approach to think about things. So I'll give you an example. Um, when you think about, we have nomads in the digital age. When you think about a country like Mongolia, which is, geographically dispersed, highly distributed, you have many groups of people who are not necessarily stationary. How do you get them involved? Well, online schools do work in many different ways. You don't necessarily have to always think that I have to build schools in every single region so that everyone can have access to brick and mortar schools. My son, who is good at math, which makes me very happy, but he's good at math because I actually have told him that you should learn math online. Don't learn it in school. And he goes to a very good school. Right? I send him to a very expensive private school, but he still learns math using Khan Academy, which is entirely free and really perfect. And he's good in it because he likes to look at the videos and finds out things. And he's improved in math because of an online tool. Does that mean that going to school is not necessary? No. Because in school he learns how to engage with other kids, how to play, how to be a child. Right? So you see that the educational system can change, not by saying you do either or, but if you combine it in the right way, you can also address some of the key societal issues here and in many other places that are similar to Mongolia, where you offer certain aspects, where you institutionalize that certain aspects of things can be done online, and also the help for it, for tutoring, can be done online, and then certain aspects can be done in brick and mortar schools, because it is unlikely that in a country like Mongolia, or I've seen this in Botswana, and I've seen this in many other African countries where I spend a lot of my time, which have similar sort of ratios of people to regions, where you can't just afford it. A government will not ever be able to afford to build physical brick and mortar schools in every single region to serve every single child. And online and digital can make a huge difference in this. Now, in the same vein, the last thing that I want to talk about is what I call learning for life. So here's another thing which I think has changed dramatically and has been really significantly impacted by the digital revolution. I'll give you a simple example. When we started with my conversational English startup, we went to people and said, look, we can help you to improve your conversational English, okay? And everyone was like, yeah, this is really interesting, blah, 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 right? And when we went to the same students and we told them, we can help you to get a job interview with an American company, because we will teach you how to prepare yourself in a job interview, how you speak in a job interview, how to present yourself in a job interview. Of course, it's the same thing. It's just the goal is a different one. We got tremendous responses, right? So people were like, okay, wait a second, this is something I really need. This is something I really want, right? So we see this all the time, that when you have to do something, you may not have learned it in school, but there are educational services and packages that will help you to train it. In Germany, where I live, this has been institutionalized, right? It's called dual studies. So 50% of the people who pass out of high school actually don't go to university, but they take a job, and on the side, the government has organized it in such a way that you study half of your time and you work half of your time. Right? So which means you're actually learning the job in a much more deeper way than you could if you just study for 5 years and then join the same company. Highly employable individuals. It's good for the private sector, it's good for the government, and it changes the paradigm completely. Similarly, in the coding world, you don't have to necessarily learn coding from the age of 5. That's great if you do, but if you don't, and you want to be a coder, it is sufficient if you learn something in a crash course over 3 months where you are incredibly focused. And there are a lot of coding academies that are coming up with exactly this concept, right? Which say we're going to prepare you not for everything, but for the specific thing that you need in your job. And we will spend 3 months and we will do all of the things that you need to do to be proficient enough to write industrial strength software. So the learning for life thing is, I would say, a largely educational, technology-driven things where a lot of things like learning what are the right interventions for you to learn something very fast. A lot of the things that I see in AI that are actually very useful are very useful in this space. But it's also a space where policymakers need to now start understanding, how you separate out what you learn in school, what you learn in the learning for tests segment, and what you could learn in the learning for life segments. Because I would rather have an education system that does what it does today better and more technology enabled, more deeply integrated, measuring more deeply, where the students are, how well they are doing, than an educational system that tries to diversify itself into too many different things where you don't even know what's going to come. That's the reality, right? And that's why I just want to leave you with this, is that I think if we imagine the possibilities of what technology can do, we need to first start with, what is actually, what do we do to learners today? And I don't think that you need to change entire educational systems. Technology is very cool and all that, but I think it would be good enough if educational systems do what they do better. And technology can help you to do that better by measuring how well students do, by looking at the interventions that you bring in, by adapting to what works and what doesn't work better. A curriculum shouldn't be changed every 5 years. A curriculum should be changed every year. But you can't do it today because you don't measure, right? That's the role of IT. I think, for me, the use of technology, especially online and video, is so incredibly important. Video is the technology of the future. Actually, video and audio over the internet, right? This is the technology of the future. And this is what helps you to connect with every single person anywhere in the world. And the technology is not as good as you think. It's actually quite poor today. There's a lot of innovation that needs to go into really good video technology. At the deepest level, there's no good video technology service out there that actually works in every given circumstances, right? So in a place like Mongolia, you can solve a lot of problems with these kinds of interventions, right? I want to leave you with the thought that changing the educational system to me is improve human capacity. It's not about technology. Technology is just a tool. Technology, and I say this as somebody who spends 90% of his time coding, even as the CEO of a small company. I code every day from 7 o'clock in the morning till midnight because I have to. But I can assure you, I only do it, and I had to learn because I had to, not because I want to. And technology is only helpful if it helps a specific use case, not by itself. Don't make a strategy around big data. You don't need big data unless you need to know how big data works if you want to measure better how your students perform, right? It's about human capacity. It's not about technology. Thank you very much.
Тэднийг авч явах гэж баярлалаа.